to the A Sound Effect Podcast, the podcast about sound effects. My name is Asbjørn Andersen, and I'm the founder of asoundeffect.com. In this episode, Jennifer Walden talks to award-winning re-recording mixers Lindsey Alvarez and Beau Borders about mixing The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power in New Zealand. They talk about mixing in Dolby Atmos for a home audience, doing an IMAX mix for a limited theatrical release, how several episodes evolved during the mix, mixing intense episodes like episode 6, and the eruption of Mount Doom, and so much more. But before we begin, let's have a quick listen to what the independent sound effects community has been up to.
Pipe in a Lava Field by Hidden Sounds brings you the sounds of various objects dumped into a disused borehole in Iceland. Rural America by Celine Woodburn delivers beautiful sounds of insects, birds, and movements of the American outdoors. The Plastic Textures Library by Pole Position Production is filled with sounds of plastic, from balloons to bubble wrap, flexible pipes to plastic bags, buckets, cups, toys, and more. Volt Electromagnetic Fields by Just Sound Effects features recordings of electromagnetic fields captured at 192 kHz.
Hey, Jennifer Walden here for a Sound Effect, talking about the mix on Amazon Studios' The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, which came out this past summer. And if you haven't seen the series yet, what are you waiting for? It's amazing. Even more amazing are the re-recording mixers Lindsey Alvarez and Beau Borders, who are joining me here today. So Lindsey has recently won her first Emmy Award for mixing Hulu's Only Murders in the Building, and the MPSE award-winning Beau Borders has earned 2 Oscar nominations in his career for mixing Greyhound and Lone Survivor. So welcome, re-recording mixers Lindsey Alvarez and Beau Borders. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about your mix on The Rings of Power.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
So how did you get involved with the show? And when you found out that you were mixing The Lord of the Rings, what was your reaction to that?
Yeah, my connection with this project started with one of our producers, Jake Rice. And years ago, he had lunch with me in Los Angeles, and he said, "Hey, I kind of got an opportunity to go down to New Zealand and help produce this Lord of the Rings. Do you think I should go to New Zealand and move my family there?" And immediately I went, "Yeah," because I had been there almost 17 or 18 years ago on Return of the King, Peter Jackson's the third Lord of the Rings. I was there as a sound editor, and I absolutely fell in love with the place and had an amazing time. And that was a long time ago, but I said, New Zealand could only have gotten better, so yeah, go for it. And then within a year, he started contacting me again and saying, well, by the way, we do need people to come down here and help us out and do the sound mix. Would you be interested? And through our great friend Will Files, he got involved with Robbie Stambler, and then there's this Lindsey Alvarez, and all these names kept popping up of people that I knew that I hadn't quite worked with. And, Lindsey and I think we had a margarita at a party once, but I think that was kind of good enough for me to say, yeah, I can sit next to that person in a foreign country for 6 months. And
we like margaritas. We have something in common.
Why not? And little did we know what we were going to get ourselves into. And, our significant others didn't really meet each other until we were all sitting in quarantine in an airport in Christchurch, New Zealand. And, you can kind of figure it out within the first 30 seconds if you're going to get along with these people. And I think we realized right away that it's going to be some pretty extreme working conditions, and we're going to have to make sure that we have a lot of fun when we're not working. And I think we quickly realized that we were a good match.
Very true. Very true. So similar with Beau, I think I had been working with Robbie on a THX thing in like the summer of 2019. And he was telling me that there was rumblings of him working on this show. And I was like, hey, good luck. But then like over a year later, in the fall of 2020, he reached out asking if I would be interested in mixing Lord of the Rings in New Zealand with Beau Borders. And I'm like, whoa, hey, yeah, okay, sure. The way he texts too, it's like, boo-boo, boo-boo, do-do-do-do. And you're like, yes. Wow. Okay. But yeah, it was a really exciting thing. And I had known or had worked with Lindsey Weber, who is one of the executive producers for the show, on a couple Bad Robot projects. And so I was like, oh man, this is a lot of fun. I know these people. I've never worked with Beau before, but I'd heard great things and shared margarita. But yeah, it was a pretty surreal text chain. And, I kind of figured, is this still going to happen, as months went by, because they let you know so far in advance so you can plan these things. But yeah, I was like, okay, wait, hang on. We're getting like visa papers, applications for this and that. And I was like, all right, I think this is actually going to happen. Let's do it. And like Beau said, it was a lot of fun. We meet at the airport and we're like, here we go. I tried not to kick his seat because he was sitting in front of me on the long flight. No, but it was a lot of fun. And that's where I found out about it and got involved.
I love it. And I love the work that you've both done. And I was so excited to see that you were working together on this show, and even more excited to finally get this podcast booked with both of you. It took a few months to make it happen, but totally worth the wait, What an incredible first project to work on together as a team. I mean, just so much pressure to get it right. Such a high profile project. Your first time mixing together, so it's a new collaboration. You're probably dealing with some jet lag. So what were the first few days of mixing together like? Can you walk me through that?
Well, I do think that the jet lag was taken care of by a 1-week quarantine that the government made us do.
Oh, yeah, MIQ.
They took us on a bus and threw us in a hotel room, and we weren't allowed to leave the room at all, except for an hour where we were allowed to go downstairs in this like dystopian parking lot and walk around in a circle. And which we did because at least you could get outside. And then I remember it was like, I thought I was handling it really well. And then I think around the 5th day, Lindsey, who obviously she's in her own room with her husband and I'm in my room with my Emma, and Lindsey calls and she's so excited. She goes, Did you hear? Today we get to walk around in the opposite direction. And I genuinely I was excited. And I go, Emma, we get to walk counterclockwise today. And she's like, have fun. I'm not going. And so I think the little insanity of the jet lag kind of was hopefully dissipating right around then.
Yeah.
And then when they let us out, we arrived in Auckland when the whole country was coming out of a 100-day lockdown, and it was the beginning of their summer. So you couldn't have picked a country of happier people on the planet to be outside in great weather. And then we did what we do, which is we go into our dark rooms where there is no sun.
Yeah.
And, we just kind of really had to hit the ground running. A thing that we did on this project, which I'm really, really happy that we did, is we were able to start the project at Sony. And, Lindsey and I both hold the mixed tech contribution at a very, we value it very, very highly. The role of the mixed tech these days has gotten above and beyond just a person that opens up a Pro Tools session and turns a projector on in the morning. I mean, they're very, very creatively and technically involved. And so we had the great Steve Neal as our mix tech in Sony. And, I'd worked with him on a whole bunch of projects, and he was currently working with Will Files and Craig Hennigan and Mark Patterson on Stranger Things. And I knew that their setup for Stranger Things was what we needed to do on Lord of the Rings, which is very high-end home theater. It's not, It's home theater, but it's really thinking theatrically.
Right.
And our creative direction from our filmmakers was very much like we were making something big and special and lush and opulent. And, they're using all these fancy words, and we went, uh-oh, this is going to be hard. So we were, and, we were really, we both have done a lot of films. Lindsey's got a better arsenal of TV credits than I do. So I was kind of coming at it cold, really thinking more of just, I know how to make big loud movies and big loud IMAX things and everything, but to make it also sound good on a television or a tablet, or a sound bar, or how do I do that? So I really relied on Lindsey to help guide me through that. But then we both worked with Steve Neal to come up with this setup that we could trust, and that we knew our dialogue level norms and everything would fit into a spec that could stream. And, we had the confidence of something printed on tape. And I know tape is an antiquated term, but, it really was. It was saved on a hard drive, and it was this baked in thing that we created at Sony. We knew what it was supposed to sound like. So when we showed up in New Zealand and we were in these mixing theaters, one of them had been a color timing theater up until just a few weeks before we showed up. We all learned together that it's a very complicated thing that we do, this sound for movies and TV shows. And you can't just purchase equipment and plug it in and say, great, it works. It doesn't. Everything needs to be tweaked and honed and changed and manipulated, and there's a lot of equipment that we use that we're kind of using it not really in a way that it was designed for, but it works to make a TV show or a movie. So there was a big learning curve there, but because we knew that the thing that we had that came from Sony, we knew that was supposed to sound like, so we could sit back and say a little more sub, a little less surrounds, a little more EQ, a little less EQ. We were able to kind of hone and tweak, and our producers like Ron Ames and Jake Rice were so good at giving us the breathing space and the time and the financial backing to accomplish what we needed to do. So the first, and Lindsey, my brain is always fuzzy, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I really think that the first couple of weeks were really about that. It was really about dialing in our Atmos setup and how it's going to down mix into 5.1 and stereo and all these things. And we were mixing pretty hardcore, but it was really after the holidays that we just had 6 solid months of just nonstop 2 stages, overlapping schedules, sending things off to Los Angeles and in London where our filmmakers were for reviews. And it was, it turned into quite a grind.
That's exactly right. And I think because, we did have 2 dub stages, one for pre-dubs for effects, one for pre-dubs for dialogue. And so that was the other thing. It was like, all right, hang on. One is actually going to be the room that we will both work on. And so that was one thing. But then the other one, it was like a whole other thing, like with my dialogue pre-dubs, and it was a slightly different setup. And so it's just the same thing of like, okay, hang on. And it wasn't capable of Atmos. But then we're like, all right, well, now we know what it'll sound like when it's, folded down, to 7.1. So, there was a lot of trial and error getting through those first few weeks, honing in on the sound of the room, and working on all the adjustments that we could to make it sound like how we were used to hearing it. But yeah, it was exciting. And it was actually a big learning experience for me too, because I had never done anything like that before. But I mean, they did amazing things with the tweaking that they were able to do, and all the extra things they were able to provide for us to be able to work. But yeah, it was kind of crazy. And then, and then it's like, okay, hang on, let's go back into pre-dubs, and then let's work on this first episode. And yeah, I was like, okay, here we go. I'm about to work with Beau Borders here. Legend. And
hardly.
But yeah, that first episode, because we had worked on it, at Sony, and then we worked on it a little bit here, or in New Zealand to get it dialed in. That was a lot of fun, and yeah, I mean, it was great working next to Beau, and he was a very patient mixer with me, and we're both like, all right, here, let's get this music in, because that's always the last to show up, and I'm listening to music only, and I'm like, oh my God, here we go. But I'm taking up so much time. But no, it was good because we were both able to hear it together and figure out what, Bear was giving us. But yeah.
Well, spending that initial time on setting your reference and honing in the sound of that first episode, I'm sure that really paid off when you got to more action-packed ones like episode 6 and the eruption of Mount Doom. I mean, there's just so much happening in the mix on that sequence. You have epic music, massive sound effects, and of course there's dialogue. And it's a long sequence too that builds from the coursing water that reacts to the lava, and then it erupts and there's lava bombs raining down. I mean, it's just insane. Can you talk about your approach to mixing that? What are some things that you did mix-wise to make that work so well?
Yeah, I would say that probably overall the biggest challenge with something like that is just how dense that section of the show is. Like when we first go visit our dwarves in Khazad-dûm, it's a very musically driven moment that's 95% music with a little bit of sound effects in there, and then they start talking. And then there might be another scene where Galadriel's confronting Adar when she's got him, when she's finally got him, and that's just a dialogue moment, and that is just such an exercise in dialogue cleanup because everybody's wearing rubber suits, but they're supposed to be armor. So those are two examples of one is an extreme in one direction, one is an extreme in another direction. But boy, that whole episode 6, that was all hands on deck. And that was, every word is important to understand. Every sword shing and lava bomb has to be really articulate. The music has to absolutely shift gears at the right moments and be exciting or be give us the feeling of what's going to happen next. Lindsey and I are the last stop in a long line of very talented sound editors and assistants and sound designers. I mean, we had Paula Fairfield out in Palm Springs creating all this sound design for us, and everything from creatures to lava to this and that, and things would funnel from her all through. There was Damien Del Borello and Robbie Stambler, and they were our co-supervising sound editors. And Damien would be grabbing the Foley from Bespoke, which is an incredibly cool group. Amy and Jonathan, they're in New Zealand. They were able to create all of our Foley for us. That would kind of funnel through Damien. Then it would funnel through Robbie. Robbie's taking sound effects sessions from, on that particular episode, we had Chris Terhune in Los Angeles. We had other people in New Zealand. On the dialogue side, there are Stephanie Ng, and I know I sound like I'm just throwing names out, but I just wanted to build the picture that there are so many people. For every Stephanie, there's a Gareth, there's a this, or there's
Eileen.
We just had such an army of great people, and then by the time it comes to us, it has gone through a lot of hands. And then there we are looking at each other, scratching our heads going, how the heck are we going to get through this? But when we hit play, our scoring mixer was incredible with the separation of the music, and Lindsey was able to do anything with it. And that way, we're able to just go, all right, the horses are charging at us. The horses and the drums don't always get along very well. So let's lean on the brass and the violins and, but then right after, let's bring those drums back in. And, because we had all of our ingredients vetted so well by our crew, we were able to, push and pull and play and change things and move things around the room and highlight elements and then get rid of other elements at certain moments. And it really gave us a lot of creative freedom. Lindsey and I didn't really have to worry about ingredients because between Bear McCreary and Robbie Stambler and Paula Fairfield, and Damien, we had everything. Anything we needed, we just had it. And it was left up to us to just, make it as fun and cool and big and crazy as we possibly could.
Yeah, I would say, especially the start of that whole Mount Doom sequence, because I think that's when you finally realize that Waldrig, they pulled a fast one on all of them, and so he has the hilt, which they figure out it's used as a key. Which, hey, that's spoiler alert. I hope you have spoiler alerts on this.
No, it's totally fine. It's been out for a while, so people should have seen it by now. It's okay.
But yeah, that moment right there, which these cool sound effects moments of this key turning and activating the dam being released. But it was really cool because we our music editor Jason Smith, at first that whole piece was supposed to start with choir, and I think we realized that that's one of those things. It's really funny. Like, there was so much choir in that bit that we were like, all right, actually, when Mount Doom actually erupts and you're in that wide of it, we were like, whoa, I feel like we haven't stepped up another level. So we ended up nixing the choir and playing through it, and we're like, oh wait, actually this gives more room for these elements to breathe, like for the rushing water and for other things. And then you see it explode and this choir goes, whoa! And you're like, whoa, yeah. I am feeling some feels right here. It's like, it makes your hair stand up or something. But it's like, we just like sort of like, we have everything and all of this material from everybody. It's so beautiful. But then we're like, all right, hang on, it's not working together, or, something needs to come up and come down and, give the ears a break and do this, or give me some low end, or, and I mean, that sequence was a fun sequence. But yeah, it is also funny because I think that happens and you're like, oh God, what's about to happen? And then you go to a scene with dialogue with Elendil and Isildur, and it's another quiet moment. You're like, whoa, hang on. Okay, hang on. Hold your horses. But yeah, which was also a difficult scene because it's right next to a stream of water. And so the dialogue team did an amazing job with cleanup. And thank you to them.
It's amazing, like the decisions that you make on the mix stage and how differently these scenes could play out just from the choices that, you, the mixers, make. Were there any other scenes that went through an evolution mix-wise where you played around with different ideas before finding the way that made you have all the feels?
Well, I mean, every scene in the show, it was tough because a big challenge for us, I think, is that the bulk of our showrunners and Lindsey Weber and everybody, they were in London and we were in New Zealand. And so we had to just pretend that that's not going to be an issue. And, we were able to get them our mixes and they were able to give feedback and everything like that. But as far as, the first round of presentation, it was very much in-house. And it was our picture editors, Cheryl and Yakin, and our producers, Ron Ames and Jake Rice. Those were really our boots on the ground clients. During those passes, with just Lindsey, myself, and Robbie and Damo up there in the final mix room, we would include Bear McCreary, hopefully more than, most projects do. I mean, composers quite often are kind of told later what we did with their music. We really wanted to include them in the conversation and finally say, hey, this is what we did. And just like Lindsey's saying, you wrote the cue for the choir to kick in at this moment, but we just decided to be a little later. What do you think? And sometimes he'd push back and maybe he was always right. It should be back there, but you don't know until you try. Mixing, especially a show so complicated as this. I mean, there's a certain feng shui to it. And, something might be fine to Lindsey and I, and then somebody else can walk in and go, oh, that's all wrong. That's not right. And then you got to try it and see if they're right. And, the feng shui analogy is like, I can walk into your living room and it might look fine, but it might be pointed out to me that if the couch was just aimed a little bit this way, it would line up a little nicer. And it isn't until you see it that way that you go, oh yeah, why didn't that couch has been that way for 2 years? Why didn't I ever notice that? And that's kind of the fun part about having it be a real open forum and include other people's notes and ideas and feedback and everything. So, wherever we landed with the mix on these episodes, that was not our first pass. we were able to go back and forth and labor over it, and all of our showrunners and producers and filmmakers and editors and everybody were really able to throw every idea that they had at it.
I have one, and it's from that episode 6, like the evolution of the scene, where it's with Galadriel and Adar, and she's talking to him in the barn, like questioning him. We just had a note of like, hey, we need to make sure that you can hear like some orcs outside or something, because that needs to set off her asking him this thing. And so we're like, oh, okay, I mean, first of all, I was like, yeah, please give me something, because that scene had so many clicks and squeaks from the armor that Galadriel's wearing, because it's made of rubber and latex. So huge kudos and thanks to our dialogue supervisor, Steph Ing, and Eileen Roberts, our dialogue editor, who did magnificent work with the dialogue cleanup. It's this intimate scene, they're whispering, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so noisy, what can we do? But then they were like, oh, well, this thing has to happen. We're like, oh, all right, well, let's create a world out there with the orcs and the crowd out there. And then Robbie added some cool sound design to it. I mean, Beau, like, help me here. Like, it was like this weird thing where you're like, oh, there's this whole world happening outside, which of course we always try to do. And you want them to like sort of hear things. This is like a little short story, but I watched Apocalypse Now for the first time very recently. I'm sorry to admit, but yes, I just admitted that. And I remember that one scene at the end with, like Dennis Hopper interviewing Martin Sheen, and you're hearing them like talk, and it's like this close face-to-face dialogue, and you hear that whole like calamity and like craziness happening, but in the background, and you're just like, I was like, whoa, that like feels like our scene there, and we didn't even know we were gonna do anything like that. We like sort of made that bubbling of like crazy energy happening behind them, all because they were like, oh, we need to make sure you hear something from the orcs, and it turned into a really cool scene, because and it didn't have any music in the beginning of that scene, so it was a really cool evolution that I'm so happy that of the result that we came with.
Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier that you mixed in Dolby Atmos, home Atmos, not theatrical Atmos, but wanting to get kind of closer to that. So as you were mixing the scenes like this one and the eruption of Mount Doom and the battle sequences where you have so much opportunity to use the Atmos surround field, what were your thoughts on using that, knowing that people at home would be listening to this show through a soundbar or TV speakers?
Yeah, that, and the way you even asked the question really touches on like what's the difference between when you live in the theatrical world and when you live in the home theater world. And there's always a lot of debate about what do you do to your theatrical mix to make it work on a home theater mix. And some people could argue that you really need to take a lot of the dynamics out so that it plays on a smaller venue. Other people could rightfully argue that you should rely on your home theater equipment to take out those dynamics. Other people would say, why are you punishing the people that made a really great home theater setup by taking out the dynamics that they want to hear? So I wish I could tell you the right answer. All I have is an opinion and my own workflow that I developed with Lindsey on how to get this mix to work. We started with Steve Neal in Los Angeles, and then we handed that setup off to Alex Chalkoff and Luana Barnes, who are our two mix techs in New Zealand. And we tweaked the settings even further because we wouldn't just rely on, a dialogue norm preset that we were told this is what you got to fit into. Sure, we started there, but then we worked with Amazon to say, well, rather than that spec, how about this spec? And nice. I can get as technical as you want to about it, but just in layman's terms, there is a really decent spec out there for, weighted dialogue norm. And at the end of the day, it's just all about not having to grab your remote control and ride the levels during an episode of anything. Yeah. And, aside from all the math and the limiting and the gain stage structure of how to get it all, I can go on and about the numbers about it, but really at the end of the day, we would finish an episode and we'd throw our headphones on, we'd listen to it on our tablet or phone. I bought a sound bar specifically so we could just say, well, maybe a sound bar is the average of how people are listening. we did a 5.1 Sonos setup in the editing rooms. We would listen on television through the television speakers. I mean, we just started listening to it through as many devices as we could. And we just started to kind of come up with a bit of an average for something that we thought kind of is working for everything. And, if you had a full-on home Atmos, properly tuned, acoustically treated, the whole deal in your house, I'd like to think that you're going to get a pretty bold dynamic mix. You're going to really feel a lot in the overheads because we really used them in music and in sound effects. And then also if you're one of the unfortunate souls that sits on your telephone and watches it on a 2x3 inch screen, I'd like to think that you're still going to be able to hear music when there's supposed to be music and hear talking when they're supposed to be talking. Is it ideal? No, but I think what we decided was we're just going to have to go with the law of averages. Yeah. Because right now, you've got 3 mixes. You've got home Atmos, you've got 5.1, and you've got stereo. And those are the 3 mixes. And your device is going to interpolate which one to use. Rather than fight it, we just decided to embrace it. And we also kind of future-proofed it a little bit. Afterwards, we were able to make a theatrical spec mix of our first 2 episodes, as well as an IMAX mix of our first 2 episodes. So we were able to play those for some premieres and things, and we were pretty happy. Even going the other directions, going from home theater up to theatrical. Sure, we had to do some overall tweaks and everything, but we didn't have to go back to the drawing board. We were pretty close.
Wow. IMAX? I want to watch this show in IMAX.
It rocks in IMAX. I only wish we could have done the whole series, season in IMAX, because episode 106 especially, one, that's the one, I always try to think in terms like I share a wall with my neighbor, so when she's in town, I unplug my subwoofer. And I just have to assume that most people have to do things like that. But episode 106, that's the one where you just say, sorry, neighbor, subwoofer's getting plugged in. This is our episode that really rocks.
Or, hey, come over. I'm watching episode 6, and you might as well come over because you're going to hear it.
That's exactly what happened.
I will add that it was a lot of fun when the series came out, and I was working on a show, and the mix tech there, he was like, "All right, I have my a fun setup in my home, and in his apartment." And after each episode aired, he was just like, "Oh my God, I just love that I can hear all the backgrounds like behind me and above me and this and that." And so I remember I was like, "Oh, I can't wait to tell Beau." Like, so, they really appreciate you doing, because it is lush, around you and above you.
Yeah, and for a show that's so VFX heavy, I feel like the activity and discrete sound in the surrounds really helps to bring this world to life. You feel immersed in this world that could have easily seemed plasticky and painted on, but it doesn't. And I feel like that's because of the sound. I was talking to Damien Del Borello about how every shot was literally a VFX shot. So what were some of the other things that you did mix-wise to help this world feel real, to feel like it has depth and character and life?
That was one of the funny bits of direction that we got, early on. When you're with the elves, it has to sound one way, more light, mystical, magical, almost always nature-based. When you're in Khazad-dûm with the dwarves, it's very rocky and stony and there's going to be water dripping. But even though you're in a cave, you don't want it to feel cold and lonely. There is a warmth to it because they're in a pleasurable environment. So setting up all the environments was really fun, and it's, hopefully you should be able to kind of close your eyes and just hit play on a scene and just kind of know that you're with the elves or you're out on the water. Setting all that up was really key. And there were a couple of scenes where, like our producer, Ron Ames, that was his big note was like, more nature, more birds, more this, more that. And it took me a while to realize, well, because he was there for the shooting and he's very involved with the visual effects, he knows that they're standing on a soundstage and it's all green screen and there's just nothing nature-based there at all. It's all fake. So he's painstakingly trying to visually convince you that you are out in the forest and there is a cliff there with a waterfall and they're talking right next to it. He doesn't want you to think that you're on a shooting stage outside of Auckland. with a bunch of blue boxes and, guys in spandex, holding tree leaves on fishing poles.
Yeah.
And, he's trying to erase that from your brain. So he's trying to overcompensate with nature sounds. But he was talking to the right crew because we were like, yeah, let's make it lush. Sure. Fine. Why not?
I remember that exactly. He was like, it sounds too clean. And I'm like, and so, yeah, Beau, like, hang on. He's like, I gotcha. The other fun thing with all the environments is, oh my God, I was playing so much with reverbs and delays and different plugins of reverbs and delays. And that was so much fun because I have not worked on a lot of fantasy shows where you have these crazy, awesome spaces. It's been more like reality, like in a home or something. And so that was so much fun to play with. And I was like, okay, actually, I think I just added another reverb to my session. Okay, we're doing Phoenix Verb now, guys. I had like so many, but it was a lot of fun and it just made it easier to do that. But yeah, you can get really, really weird and funky with it too, with this kind of show, with all the magical elements that are involved. So that was fun. And, and I pan my dialogue at times. I know people don't like it, but but I was like, you know what, I'm gonna experiment. Hey, we're in Lord of the Rings, guys. We can do other things.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of reverb work. So, did you have like a favorite scene for dialogue and reverbs? Was there a favorite location or a favorite environment?
Well, there were a few. I think the coolest one, and a lot of it was what Robbie had put into it, before coming on the stage, is the stranger with the mystics in the last episode.
Okay,
that was so much fun because, you have a bit of like Pan Man going on, so it's like going around you. There are also delays and upmixing that I did for all of that. And then with the mystics, they're sort of like getting in your ears, left and right. And so that was a lot of fun. And I was like, oh, I get to like do something really weird because that's what this scene calls for. And I don't think it went too crazy, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. That's one example off the top of my head.
Yeah. I was thinking of Khazad-dûm and Disa singing to the rocks.
Oh my God. Yeah. That was beautiful. The score that we got in that moment, it was, you're coming from this moment of Arondir and Theo running through the woods being chased by all these orcs. And it is so beautiful and cinematic. And all the treatment that, you did, Beau, with the arrows and the hits. I love that it's like musical too, like the whistles and everything through that. But then it transitions into the mountain and you hear Disa's voice. The way Bear had delivered it to me, it already had a bit of delay into it. But then, when you get in there and you see her, we enhanced it definitely with more delays and reversing things and verbs and this and putting it all around you. We worked a lot on that little bit, especially just the last note. We're like, oh, what do we do? And then you sort of like hear it resonating where it's like you can hear the harmonics of her voice and it's like going, or, it's like, it was really fun and cool.
Fantastic. Yeah.
It. The way the studio was where we were, our mixing stages were actually on the top floor, and then the bottom floor was where our Jake Rice and Ron Ames, and then the picture editors and visual effects editors, and then Robbie Stambler and Damien Del Borello had near field mixing rooms down there too. And I think for weeks, everybody was having to listen to Disa resonating, just barreling out of Robbie's room. He was just working on so many layers and getting the harmonics right and getting it to kind of waver at just the right time. So you really feel like maybe she's affecting the environment. And it was a very tough sell, but I really commend not just Robbie, but with Bear McCreary and the way they were able to really work together. That was a very fun moment.
Okay, Beau, favorite scene to mix effects wise?
Good one. I do love a good battle.
Yeah.
I just, I'm just a sucker for 1,000 horses riding over the meadow and coming into town and just hacking and slashing. It's just a lot of fun. It's so much fun to get the right amount of gore and violence, but, still keep it family friendly. We keep going back to episode 106, but the whole episode, like kind of the arc of the episode, I really like how, as the sound effects mixer, I was allowed to just take it because it's a battle, but then hand it back to music because it's got to feel triumphant, and then make it a dialogue moment. And then when Galadriel goes chasing after Adar through the woods, that might be my favorite piece of music that Bear came up with throughout the whole show. So it's really the handoffs, and it's funny because I hope Lindsey feels the same way. I mean, sure, my fingers are on the sound effects all day long, but I really do feel like it was, Lindsey and I just mixing everything. There was no line delineated between the two of us of, oh, I have the sound effects and you've got the dialogue and music. I mean, it was very much like, bring me your sound effects notes. What do you think I can do with the sound effects to help us hear the music? And then, trust me, I didn't hold back. Threw it back her way together. But, there weren't really any big egos involved here. So it was really just about, what the heck can we do to the scene to get the story point moved across and keep the excitement up, or protect Bear's music, or protect Paula Fairfield's sound design. And so my favorite scene to mix, it's really hard to pinpoint one because, it's not always going to be the big, loud, bombastic sound effects moment. Sometimes you're just on a ship and somebody doesn't tie a rope right and some guy goes flying and you're supposed to hear the creaking and the people scrambling and the seagulls and everything. And it's a fun moment when you look at even a scene like that and you have to remember, oh yeah, they're on a soundstage on a gimbal. There's no water in this on this set at all. And, we're able to kind of convince you that, we're out in the middle of the ocean. So it's, stuff like that I love.
So I just have time for one more question. So what have you learned while mixing the Rings of Power that has helped you to grow as a mixer?
Ooh, I think I've learned the importance of making sure that you've got the right people in the room and the right people supporting the room, meaning the mix room. I think if we had a strength on this show, it's the crew. And it's from our mix techs in New Zealand to our mix tech in Los Angeles to, Robbie and Damo manhandling this giant crew spread across many countries. And we didn't have any weak links, in assisting and editing and sound design, on the dialogue side, on the music side with, Jason Smith as our music editor in-house. And I mean, we just didn't have any weak links, and it was a group of people that not only really wanted this to be a special sounding project, but we also really enjoyed going to my house and having Emma cook dinner for us. We really enjoyed getting on a boat and going on a kayaking adventure together on a weekend. I couldn't say the same for most crews. There's plenty of shows where the moment we wrap the day, I don't want to see these people anymore. And I bet that they don't want to see me. I'm sure I'm just as annoying to them, and they don't want to be around me anymore. But this was different. It was usually around Thursday or Friday of every week. I'd finally look over at Lindsey and go, have you heard what we're doing this weekend? She goes, no, let me check, and go, oh, okay, we're going to a vineyard and we're gonna kayak into a glowworm cave, and then there's a river rafting thing. We're allowed to paddle off a 2-story cliff because it's New Zealand and they let you do that kind of thing. And we go, okay. And then we would drag along anybody from work that wanted to go with us because we loved them all. And I think that was my takeaway from it is, I'm just going to do everything I can on every future project to make sure I like everybody in the room.
Beau, that's very well said. This was my first project working not in LA. So, I learned what it's like to work on location. And like he said, it was fantastic. We worked really hard on the sound for the show. I'm so happy with what we produced, and I approached it just like I approach every project, and it worked, and we did great. I love the final product, but yeah, it was extra magical being in New Zealand, and yes, with these people, because man, we were just like a family, and everybody was so great and supportive. So I like that. Yeah, you like everyone you work with. It's a good way to go.
Well, excellent job on the show. All the decisions that you made on the dub stage and all the effort and care that you put into this mix, it really shows. It sounds fantastic. So congratulations to you on that. And I can't wait to talk to both of you about the next project that you mixed together. So be sure to keep me posted on that.
We'll give you the exclusive interview when it happens. But,
all right, I'm going to hold you to that.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
But thanks for doing this interview. And it's also just a great opportunity for people like Lindsey and I to just beg those out there that are interested, just watch this one on the biggest screen you can. And if your neighbors don't like it when you crank up the volume, then invite them over.
Absolutely, yeah. So full disclosure, I watched this show outside, invite the neighbors over. I got this huge projector screen, but what I listened to is a PA, right?
Wow.
How did it sound?
Essentially, it sounded fantastic, right? So a lot of bass, throws a lot of sound, and the dialogue sits right in the middle. But essentially, it's mono. It's a mono speaker. So I got to tell you, man, the show sounded fantastic in mono.
There you go. We aim to please.
We did it.
Well, thank you guys so much again for sharing your time and your story with me. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
A big thanks to Lindsey Alvarez and Beau Borders for the insights, and to Jennifer Walden for the interview. Also thanks to Christian Halskær for the sound effects highlight. Looking for more audio-related podcasts to listen to? We're part of the Audio Podcast Alliance, featuring a hand-picked selection of the very best podcasts about sound. Be sure to hear the latest episodes from our friends in the community at audiopodcast.org. That's it for this episode. Thanks a lot for listening, and see you next time. Take care.